All right, so I adjust this. I was thinking to myself today, why is it that I guess sexual tension in general, basically the premise or like the situation is not intentionally romantic, uh, but it has aspects that are like coincidentally or incidentally romantic or sexual. So like, for example, uh, you go to the pool supposedly for cooling off. It's hot out. It's fun to swim. It's good exercise to meet up with friends. But of course, guys and girls are relatively scantily clad. So there's an element of sexual tension. Maybe similarly in school, you go there supposedly for education. And I say supposedly, I just mean like the common idea. It doesn't mean I'm saying that it's all false. I'm just saying that that's kind of what the excuse is. That's what's going on. So for education, because you have to. But there's a high concentration, a very unnaturally high concentration of almost exactly the same aged kids. And of course, as you get older, past puberty, kids in a romantic sense, you're all like around each other constantly, able to wear a wide variety of clothing and doing all sorts of activities where you're in close quarters or contact or in certain positions, sitting down next to each other or brushing up against each other incidentally. And I was thinking why, I mean, even to me personally, there's like this, in a dating sense or a romantic pursuit sense or metric, there's something really appealing about situations which are not explicitly romantic, things you have to do for other reasons other than finding a partner or someone that you're interested in. That is really appealing as far as an environment goes to pursue romantic ends, to court girls. It has a very positive appeal in my mind. If I was trying to go from being single to in a relationship, the idea of like a direct asking someone out on a date or a speed dating scenario makes me feel a little anxious, and also makes me feel, maybe this is a big part of it, it makes me feel like I have a way lower range of as far as like whatever I'm looking for in top quality partners, whether it's attractiveness or personality or values or interests, whatever the best possible combination of all of those or in whatever order. If you're going into an arena specifically looking for a person, you are limited by your own perceived value to other people. Whereas if you're going into an arena that is specifically not about romance or evaluation along those metrics, it's kind of up for grabs, I guess. It's you're allowed to kind of slowly seek out and see whether a girl is interested in you without that pressure of explicit rejection. And you're able to interact with girls that you have maybe, once again, from an objective view, which no one really has, but there is an objective view if you knew what people were thinking, and what they would think. The objective view, there would be some girls that are way too attractive or have, just certain qualities that allow them to really have their pick of any guy, and vice versa, guys with girls. So there are situations in which it is impossible, at least within a explicitly dating arena. There are situations where it is impossible for you to persuade or seduce that person into wanting to date you, or even just be romantically involved, like for a kiss or even a hug in some circumstances. So it's almost like you kind of get to break the rules, and a higher element of luck is thrown in there when you try to pursue romance in a specifically not directly romantic situation or a not romantic arena. Which is really interesting to me, that the most appealing scenario, and I know I've been repeating this a lot, but the most appealing scenario for me to pursue romance is outside of a directly romantic mechanism, like dating, or I guess seeking dates. I guess maybe I'm seeing it incorrectly. Maybe dates are more correctly viewed as a symptom of interest rather than a catalyst to discover interest. Maybe I'm miscategorizing. By the time you've gone on the date, maybe things are already relatively decided to a certain degree, whether it's possible. And so that's just kind of like a compromise for efficiency. Like, oh, I want to know sooner rather than later, and there's not a guaranteed possibility that I'll get to investigate the things that I want to about you. There's not a guaranteed possibility unless we go on a date. Isn't it? So maybe a date in itself, if you're not already in a relationship, if you're like truly, either on the fence or you just kind of want to know more, you're tentative for some reason. If that's the situation, which is, I think, the situation that I want to deal with predominantly in the game, if that's the situation, then maybe asking someone out on a date in that realm of uncertainty is actually a compromise. Similar to how, I was going to say asking someone on a date. Yeah, so it's a compromise in that you do not feel certain that you will learn what you want to learn in order to pursue further, or that they know enough about you in order for a relationship to just happen. And what I mean just by just happen is physical advancement. I think that the natural, or I guess you could say evolutionary order, is not to arrange a complex social mechanism. I was just talking about this with a friend recently. Relationships don't exist because of a complex social mechanism in which you try to set up certain social awareness, so like psychological awareness. So you don't get in a relationship by having a Facebook status. That's just a kind of a cultural phenomenon that is a symptom of a relationship. So a relationship being a symptom of hopefully mutual interest in each other. Obviously, there's plenty of dysfunctional relationships that do not start out on mutually beneficial grounds, which is really unfortunate. But as far as the mold, generally the relationships, I would say, do start out with that expectation, at least, or thinking from both people. that there's a mutual interest there. So going on a date before that is discovered, or like, I guess you could say artificially, because I say artificial because you're making a conscious action. You're basically saying, I see potential for a relationship here, and we should speed up the process. Because if there's interest, and there's the necessary requirements, I guess maybe that's what you're saying. When you're asking someone on a date, you're not necessarily saying that the relationship couldn't happen organically out of a non-contrived scenario, because dates are they're contrived scenarios to basically see if anything would happen. I guess you could compare it to in a normal state of affair, if you're going to school or something like that. 1 second. In a normal state of affairs, if you're going to school, you might be continuously in a group environment, and a group environment can have some sexual tension, some interest, but there's no avenue for expression of that. You're probably not going to go for a handhold or a first kiss in general in a group setting, And if you're like, oh, well, maybe if you're like off the group, well, that doesn't count as a group setting. Then you've got your own like miniature private moment going on there. So maybe asking someone on a date is more so of a declaration of, I think a relationship would happen given the right environmental conditions. You're basically saying, I think we'd be making out. I don't know. I think we'd be making out. It's just an idea. I think we'd be making out if we were in an environment in which we were alone and sufficiently, at ease and relaxed, and maybe sufficiently confident or hopeful about the other person's level of interest. So you're saying, yeah, if the only reason we're not in a relationship is we haven't crossed any physical boundaries. Now, you might disagree with that. You might say, oh, no, it's the emotional or intellectual boundaries that need to be crossed on a date, talking about feelings. Or, connecting on a more one-on-one basis, on a deeper level. But a lot of that you can do through group settings or adjacently group settings pretty easily. So I think it is fundamentally a statement of, I'd like to fast forward this because I don't like not being. I'm not in control of the development of this relationship, and I think there's a capacity there. Rather robotic terms to put it in, but I think it's important because these put forth principles about the ritual of asking a girl out. And maybe because it's that, you're declaring that you think there's a capacity for a relationship and your interest, and either your confidence that they might have interest, or I guess it's definitely possible to not be confident that they have interest, but that you think it's worth the risk. You think that that you deserve interest from them, or that it could be there. So what does this mean for a relationship starting in Forbidden Technique? Well, I guess once again, getting back to my feelings on being drawn towards specifically not directly romantic situations to be catalysts for romantic engagement. I think it does a couple things. It allows the player to be in a low-stress environment for considering those options. I think, and I've said this before, but it's really important to me not only that the AI can say yes or no, but that the player can say yes or no, that they can disengage and have that rejection of the females. I think that's really important. And so having that kind of come up in a potentially repetitive way allows for a much less panic decision. Because, obviously in a lot of games, if there is any romantic choices at all, you get it one time, and it's like, oh, like in Persona, like, oh, are you sure about this? So think about your answers carefully. Which, is true in real life when you have direct questions or situations like that. But a lot of times it's more gradual. There's a lot of, milestones on the way, just like, oh, that could have meant a significant amount of interest. That could have conveyed that I thought she was hot, and you have a accumulation of a lot of things build more and more certainty or confidence to progress forwards. And so that is more natural in a specifically not romantic situation, because with dating or speed dating or arranging dates, there's kind of a direct pressure for it to either work and continue or not work and not continue. So that's kind of like, at the end of the day, the summary is that. But if you have a reason if there's another driving force, it makes the relationship more complicated and I think more interesting. But also lets the player make a more intelligent choice rather than a gut feeling earlier on, a series of decisions, partially to even get to know, kind of toe in the water in a sense, get to know people in a slow ramp up. Maybe at first you think you're into a girl and then there's like parts of her that you don't like, or things don't go as you had hoped. And then you break it off. I think that's as important of a thing that you should be able to do in the game as anything else. If you can say yes to a yes or no at the beginning of a relationship, but you can't back out, you can't get out, that well, obviously it's frustrating. It leads to all other kinds of conflicts in the game. From the player's point of view, but once again, escalates the panic and stress. Not that, panic and stress is like a must avoid at all costs, but I think it's realistic to be aware, like you are in real life, that the relationship, can be ended. And because it can be ended, you don't have to be sure that you want to marry the person. If you kiss them or, got on a date with them, of course. Anyways, just some thoughts. This was fun. Tune in again next time.